The end of 2020 is closing in on us fast, and if you have any interest in the video game industry, you'll know that at the end of this year, we will see Microsoft and Sony usher in a new generation of consoles, promising higher resolutions, faster loading times, but most importantly, better and even more groundbreaking games than we have seen before. And one of those games that will be helping to introduce these new consoles is of course Assassin's Creed. I'm a massive Assassin's Creed fan. I was instantly hooked when I first played it at a friend's house 13 years ago, and I've been so engrossed and emotionally attached to this series that it's even a permanent part of me now. But if any of you have watched my video titled Assassin's Creed Odyssey isn't Assassin's Creed, then you'll know that my faith and love for the series has been tainted significantly following the creative and narrative decisions made in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. But despite the shortcomings of Odyssey, I still want and hope for a true return to form with the next Assassin's Creed title, which is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But I've come to a realization, and that is that Assassin's Creed Valhalla will more than likely be my final Assassin's Creed game. Let me explain why. When Ubisoft originally set out to make the first Assassin's Creed game back in 2007, they had a clear narrative direction and goal for their game. You played as Desmond in a not so far off future where you used a machine called the Animus to relive the memories of your ancestors who were assassins, who were capable of great feats of parkour which they used to navigate the world, and with a focus on social stealth to dismantle the Templar Order with their hidden blade, who threatened the assassin's values and also the present day world. This was such an exciting and unique premise at the time, and created an immediate cult following for the soon-to-be franchise, and it seemed all would go well. And for the next few years, it did. The follow-up sequels were greatly praised, and despite small issues with controls and narrative pacing, Assassin's Creed continued to be a successful franchise for 5 years. It wasn't until 2013 that the cracks began to form in the direction Ubisoft wanted to take their franchise. Assassin's Creed 3 delivered a dividing but almost somewhat definitive ending to the story of Desmond, who's the main character tying all these games together. And while the ending was conclusive for the story we had been following for the past 5 years, it left the door wide open for follow-up sequels. After Assassin's Creed 3, a lot of us were pondering over where the franchise could go, as AC3 felt like the Avengers Endgame of the series. It felt as if the sequel was almost unnecessary and unearned, as apart from the clear sequel bait at the end, the main narrative was complete. And this is where Ubisoft begins its identity crisis of the Assassin's Creed series. 2014's Black Flag was a clear step away from what we had seen before. Instead of being driven by its modern day plot, which is the signature of the Assassin's Creed franchise, and what makes it unique from other similar games, it chose to use its pirate setting as the true forefront and narrative direction of the story and gameplay. And although the gameplay is incredibly fun and truly allowing you to live the pirate experience, it felt as if it lost some of the heart of what makes it an Assassin's Creed game. It was at this time Ubisoft made a very interesting comment, which I wonder if it still holds weight today. In an article with Eurogamer in 2014, creative director of Black Flag said, "We have an idea of where the end is, what the end is. But of course we are a yearly title. We ship one game a year. So depending on the setting, depending on what the fans want, we've given ourselves room to fit more in this arc. But there is an end." So it seems even back in 2014, despite the success of Black Flag, Ubisoft were aware that we had picked up that they were artificially extending the life of the franchise so that they could continue to release more titles in the franchise before giving us the true ending to the series. And although it might not have been obvious to everyone back in 2014 with Black Flag, the following titles truly showed that Ubisoft had no idea where they wanted the series to go, and were focusing on setting up as much future games as possible, with little to no overarching and engaging narrative to tie it all together. Following the damn right awful Syndicate in 2015, Ubisoft took the decision to take a step away from the series to re-evaluate what they wanted Assassin's Creed to be, and reinvigorate the franchise. And Assassin's Creed Origins did just that. It was a strong return to the original formula that also implemented new mechanics to help keep the game fresh and open to newcomers, but with enough lore and attention to detail to keep the core fanbase engaged. The present day story was reintroduced from the perspective of new protagonist Layla Hassan, and although it was kept extremely minimal, the time you spent with the character left us begging as fans for a sequel. It felt as if Assassin's Creed had finally found its identity again. And then we got Odyssey. Odyssey came in under the disguise of a Trojan horse and seek to tear all the good work and foundations laid in Origins, by breaking established lore, replacing the fantastic Dark Souls-esque combat of Origins with something which felt more like it belonged in a free-to-play MMO, and wanting to give us a B-Tech Witcher clone by selling us the idea that, oh, it's not grindy, it's to encourage exploration. Instead of carrying on the mystery of Layla Hassan's character and what is truly going on in the present day, instead of furthering the intrigue of the events set out in Origins, instead of building on that great gameplay mechanics that helped to breathe new life into the franchise, Odyssey chose to rewrite its identity, without ever earning it or giving a believable reason as to why. And that brings us to Valhalla. After a mixed response to the initial reveal trailer, Ubisoft has come forward to shed more information as to what we should expect from this game. And what they've told us is that, although it's a continuation of the story from Odyssey, Valhalla will be a return to the original Assassin's Creed formula, and will also provide a satisfying conclusion to not only the Layla storyline, but also the previous games before it. But instead of the comments filling me with confidence, they reminded me of similar promises from an also greatly adored franchise, which also had promising starts in its reboots, but ultimately fell apart at its conclusion.
Chewie, we're home.
After a decade of absence from cinemas, Star Wars returned in full force with The Force Awakens in 2015. Disney's soft reboot, led by J.J. Abrams, brought the franchise to a new audience while retaining the feel and identity of the previous films under George Lucas's reign. Nobody could see it going wrong. The Force Awakens did all the hard work. It gave purpose to its existence with a mysterious antagonist rising from the shadows to oppose our new protagonist, Rey, who was guided by characters of the original films while being true to the existing world and lore. Yet, somehow, when Rian Johnson was brought in to direct the sequel, The Last Jedi, instead of carrying on the torch lit by J.J. Abrams, he chose to create his own Star Wars story, while single-handedly destroying and insulting the established canon for the sake of subverting expectations. The Last Jedi truly divided fans and critics alike over whether it was right to essentially sabotage the franchise for the sake of making it truly accessible to create further films no longer woven into what the heart of Star Wars is. And a few years later, we were given our first look at the conclusion to the new trilogy with J.J. Abrams back at the reins. Despite the reveal receiving a lukewarm reception, J.J. Abrams did a fantastic job of getting us to buy into his promises. which were that Rise of Skywalker would carry on directly from The Last Jedi with its new direction. However, it would be a return to formula and provide a satisfying conclusion not only to the new trilogy, but the entire franchise as we know it. Sound similar yet? You have the reboot. Led by someone who has a true passion for the series, who reels you back into the franchise by leaning heavily on what we already know and love, while introducing new elements to draw a new audience in. You have the sequel, led by a new face wanting to make their own vision of what the franchise is, ignoring all previous plot elements and lore in an attempt to make it their franchise, ultimately splitting the fan base and deterring your core fans from future sequels. And then you have the conclusion, with the original director back in the seat, promising to round things off in a satisfying way, yet be true to whatever choices were made in the previous title. Now, this analogy isn't to say that Valhalla will be a bad game, and that it will ultimately let us down like Rise of Skywalker did. But what we should take away from it is that, as much as we might think that these creative directors and film directors are truly passionate about the projects they work on, those guys have bosses too. And they are told in what direction they must take a franchise, even if it's against their own opinion. That's not to say they don't have creative input at all, but I do believe they work in a very constrained circumstance, which doesn't allow them to have full creative freedom, which is needed to give us a truly satisfying game and conclusion. And unfortunately, they become the scapegoat for the companies when it turns out not as they said. Assassin's Creed is Ubisoft's hottest franchise right now, and like it or hate it, Odyssey sold well and was critically well received. Why would Ubisoft look to steer away from its RPG-like formula with little care for previous lore, when new fans either don't care or haven't experienced the previous titles? From a business perspective, the Odyssey model works. So even though we're being told that Valhalla will be a return to formula, I think the extent of what we're hoping for will be short-lived, and we should be prepared for something which is similar to Odyssey, with perhaps only small things such as grindiness tapered back. Earlier this week, footage leaked of Valhalla showing some very early development gameplay, which gave us somewhat of an idea of how the next game will play. And while I don't want to criticise it too much, as it is raw leaked footage of the game clearly in early development, it does appear to be recycling many of the same assets seen in Odyssey, with the same flaky combat on display. After seeing the original reveal trailer, and knowing we were to be playing as a Viking, I was hoping for the combat to be somewhat a mixture of Assassin's Creed Origins and God of War, with each swing feeling deliberate and forceful, with the camera positioned in a more narrative perspective, as opposed to the more zoomed out and almost bird's eye effect of Odyssey. And that is why Assassin's Creed Valhalla will more than likely be my final Assassin's Creed. Not because the series is going to have a definitive ending. Of course it's not. It makes too much money now, and I think it's more than likely we will see the present day storyline abolished completely, so that they can continue to make annual releases in set time periods with its Witcher-like formula. I'm bracing myself to feel just how I felt after walking out of seeing Rise of Skywalker. That this new Star Wars wasn't created for me, or people like me, who were emotionally attached and invested in the films, comics and books. This is now a product, released to appeal to shareholders and to hit profit margins, with all of its original heart left in the past. I will play Valhalla, and I will review the game. But if it goes the way I feel it's going to, I'm ready to walk away from the franchise, and accept that this new Assassin's Creed isn't Assassin's Creed. Normally at this point, if you watch my videos, I have my video outro, but I thought I'd do something a little different. I wanted to give a shout out to some creators that I believe you should definitely subscribe to and watch their content. Lasers is a channel I've watched for a few years now, but I found myself religiously watching in the past 8 months. I came across him due to his passion for the Assassin's Creed franchise, but I stuck around for his incredible insight into several different games, not just Assassin's Creed. His video on The Witcher 3 is just insane, and I can't respect this man's work ethic enough to produce content like that. Also, his podcast, the As Always podcast, literally carried me through lockdown as I was a key worker, and I'll forever be thankful content like that is available to us for free. I can definitely see him being past 1 million subscriber mark in just a few years' time, so if you can go check him out, I'm sure you'll enjoy. Infamous Sir Hellfire was just one of those great YouTube recommended videos that put the right content in front of the right person, regardless of views or sub count. His video, The Assassin's Creed Project, is one of the best insights I've seen into the original Assassin's Creed story, and I can't wait for part 2 of this project. His channel deserves so much more subscribers than he already has, so please show him the love he deserves. TJFL, signing out.